Welcome to the Asset Reliability at Work podcast.
Endless journey of delight and profitability.
I think some people use it as a derogatory term towards accountants.
Being visible to the employees is important.
Hey, podcast listeners. As always, welcome back to another episode on the Asset Reliability at Work podcast. So Tara and I are very excited to be on this podcast once again, bringing you a new episode. I know we took about a month off to curate working hard to curate new content as well as some new voices for you.
We've been super busy, but it's so good to be back.
It absolutely is. So we have a really insightful episode for you guys today. We're very excited about this one. Dan Anderson, who is our account manager, is joining us to talk about basically 2017 in review. So he's going to hit on some of those most common issues that he's fielded. And, you know, he's one of those frontline guys who talks to manufacturing organizations about their issues. So he's the perfect person to have on this podcast. And I will say he's no newbie to podcasting. I know he's done a couple episodes on the Rooted in Reliability podcast hosted by James Kovacevic, but we're finally able to get him on our podcast. So it's been a long time coming, Dan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Derek.
Absolutely, Dan. The pleasure's all ours. So the title of this episode is 2017 Retrospective, The Pulse of the Reliability Community. I love the title, The Pulse of the, because it's all encompassing of what we're about to talk about. And all credit goes to Tara for the title description of that. So like I said, we're going to talk about some highlights of 2017, trends that we've seen, the most common issues addressed from Dan's perspective. Dan's also a veteran to the conferences, specifically IMC this year and SMRP. So he's going to talk about some of the highlights from that. Specifically, I think diving into some of the technology aspects that he's encountered. So talking about drones, augmented reality, virtual reality, all that stuff. So that's great. But before we go any further, Dan, if you wouldn't mind, please describe your role here at Lifecycle Engineering.
Certainly. I work as an account manager within the Reliability Consulting Group. Been here for about 10 years, servicing our clients primarily through an educational standpoint, helping them to develop educational solutions. My role has expanded the past couple of years in marketing our asset management services, reliability engineering services, as well as our holistic services available through RCG.
Sounds like we have the right person for this podcast, Tara.
I definitely think so.
So and one of the topics we really wanted to get into first is talking about trends. And that's just stuff that we've seen, or specifically Dan has seen over the past year, but more specifically at conferences. So you are the SMRP Communications Chair. Right.
He's very ingrained in the reliability community.
Yes. And so he's been to a couple of those IMC conferences as well. A lot of them, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to get your take on what you've seen this year in conference season. You know, maybe that's something new, something highlight that you want to talk about, you know, compared to past years.
I tell you what, Derek, a lot of what's going on right now is very focused on technology. So, you know, even at the International Maintenance Conference, which I went to last week, a lot of focus on asset analytics, dashboards, reporting, things like that. But then also some of the increased predictive maintenance type technologies, you know, things that even include 3D printing, robots, drones, virtual reality.
Huge buzz about augmented reality and virtual reality.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of focus on that, you know, from what I've seen in the past. In the past, it's been more focused on, you know, good, solid foundational procedures and processes and implementation of those processes. But, you know, a lot of people are out there kind of marketing these things that could be shiny. And
I would definitely agree with Dan. I was at IMC too. I was presenting, Derek, as you know.
Yes,
thanks for promoting that for me. By the way, people loved our video. And I was hearing all the buzz. People were also talking about the design installation PF curve, the DIPF curve, which is so exciting. And I think that's where the future is going. But when I talk to people at the conference, they're still talking about struggling with reactivity, struggling with getting things done day to day and right. They're worried about the exiting workforce. So I think it's a really interesting time now to be in maintenance and reliability, and I'm glad Dan's here to share some of his learnings too.
So the reactive struggles that manufacturing organizations are having, this is not something that's new, obviously, to maintenance and reliability. So when you talk about technology, is technology there to help solve that issue? And if so, how does that work? So, you know, how does technology play into help solving those reactive issues? or does it at all?
The technology aspect, it's important. If you are caught in that proactive, world class or best in class environment, you can really utilize that type of technology for meaningful results. But, a lot of folks out there are still caught up in, reactive world and not having spare parts available, not having well-written job plans, just the fundamentals.
I got you. Yeah. So as someone in my position, I work in marketing right now. So there's a lot of new technology even in my job, but like you said, it's the same thing. If we don't have the people to do something with that, then it's just collecting just for collecting's sake.
Got to walk before you run.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So let's build on that. As somebody who is on the front line, you're talking with manufacturing facilities and people about their issues. And I guess we've been, introducing a few already through what you've experienced at conferences. But what are some other common pain points that you've heard throughout 2017?
I think first and foremost is addressing that skills gap, right? We've been talking about this for the past 10 years.
10 years.
10 years, maybe even longer.
Well, that's just what, as we've been working, together.
Yeah, but it continues to be a reoccurring theme, out there. And it's, addressing the baby boomer situation, folks that are age 53 to 71 leaving the workforce, and, for millennials. And, how do you really lead the millennials into, understanding the value of reliability, selling it to leadership, but taking an active role in the manufacturing environment and being attracted to it. Versus, again, this is a totally different type of frame of mind, that we're looking at. Sure. A generation that has, information at a moment's notice at their fingertips.
Yep.
So they're going to learn differently than the baby boomers. And, how do you go about implementing, programs to address this problem?
Have the issues evolved over time, or are they pretty similar to years past? Now, I know we talked about the reactive issues. Those are kind of, I don't know if they're evolving per se, but what's your take on that?
I think as the speed of technology and information data, increases and is available to us, you really have to learn how to harness that data. This whole big generation or big data generation, you're going to be, everything works on big data, understanding that data, how do you utilize it for meaningful results? So most organizations utilize predictive maintenance because, they're attracted to a gadget or a shiny thing. Being able to see, heat through a motor or water leakage through a wall.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's all cool stuff. It is, the amount of metal particles in an oil sample, or being able to look inside of a motor, in real time. My question is, are you utilizing that data for meaningful results?
I'd like to add on to that a little bit, if I will. It does give me hope, that as we bring in a new generation of workers, they're used to this overwhelming amount of data. I think they'll actually be able to help lead the way in showing us how we can be better at capturing and utilizing data. But I do think that it's a balancing act, and it's a bridge, because the subject matter experts that are in our plants today, that have the experience and that are not as familiar potentially with that large amount of data and what to do with it, their expertise and their knowledge is something that can't be downloaded. And so we have to find the balance of having the fundamental processes and procedures, and how almost, I guess, the memorization of doing a job that has occurred over the past 50 years, 30, 20, however long, and somehow bridge that gap between the new workforce coming in that's just so readily embracing all of the technology and all of the data. But we can't lose what is in our plants now, and that intellectual capital, and
capturing that
intellectual assets, that are there, and somehow. And I don't know. I think we still have a ways to go in figuring out how do we do that. How do we keep the fundamentals, and how do we keep the processes, and still have room for all this augmented and disruptive, I guess you called it, technology.
Yeah.
So speaking of, I know we've kind of been talking about a lot of technology here, and I want to ask you one more question about that specifically. And that is, have you seen a rise in facilities wanting to better improve in their technology as a whole, part of their business?
Oh yeah. There's been a rise because technology's fun. Okay. It's something that you want to do, you want to play with. In many situations, technology helps if you are fundamentally sound and your process is not strictly focused on this technology. And I hate to kind of reel it back in, but I spoke with a lot of folks out there know George Williams from B. Braun. We just caught up with each other outside on one of the breaks at IMC, and he had brought it up. He said, all these drones and all this crazy virtual reality that's going on in there. He said, just have somebody sit down with my guys and show them how to write a good job plan. Sure. He said, at the end of the day, that's what really counts. That's what adding value to the organization. With all these other things, they're nice and they can help and they can support to bring in more data. But if you're just collecting data and more data and not doing anything with it, I think at the end of the day that kind of defeats the purpose.
So slow down and get those rich fundamental processes in place. Get the templates and the meaningful information about your critical assets that you need, and then get the fancy stuff.
Exactly.
Do you think, Dan, do you have any tips for those trying to navigate through today's reliability cultural waters?
Yeah. I'd say, for any good worker out there in manufacturing, have a proactive mentality. What can I do to fix a machine before it breaks type of mentality. What spare parts do I need to keep on hand? Which ones do I need to keep on hand? How can I help others understand the benefits of a proactive work environment so they understand the what's in it for me? We focus a lot on change management along with the business process reengineering and putting together the best process in place. But, it's really a cultural change thing too. You really have to be that leader who stands out within the organization. A lot of times it's not the most accepted. So, really, and I would say, first and foremost, to kind of wrap it up, what can I do to help management understand the financial impact of reliability? If they understand the financial impact of being more proactive in the way that assets are handled, the way that be more productive in the way that work is conducted within the organization, I think that, that is going to help extremely to support your reliability programs. And it starts from the top down. It's a partnership. It's not a maintenance initiative. Reliability isn't. It's a partnership between maintenance operations, and it's sponsored from the top down to be truly effective.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to
Yeah,
end this
thank
episode
you, Dan.
right now. That was great. So that was that proactive mentality is really where you're hitting home there on that last question.
Yep, and executive support, management support.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you so much to our guest, Dan. I know we've been wanting to have you on the podcast for quite some time now.
I think maybe we should have him on another one, Derek. What do you think?
I would love it.
Sooner than later.
Yeah.
So there you have it. That's going to wrap up today's episode, listeners. Once again, that is Dan Anderson, an account manager right here at Lifecycle Engineering. So we're going to have a few links on our podcast episode page. So go in there and connect with Dan on LinkedIn. We're going to have a link to his LinkedIn page and some other resources.
All right. This is Tara and Derek signing off. See you next time.
All right,
cheers.
Hey, listeners, one more thing before you go. If you have any feedback for the show, or you have maybe some suggestions for upcoming topics you'd love to hear about, we'd like to hear from you. So there's two ways to get in contact with us. The first is on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @LCE_today, so be sure to follow us. And then the other way is to email the show at podcast@lce.com. Once again, thank you for joining the show, and we look forward to more episodes on the Asset Reliability at Work podcast.